All right, welcome to Two Sons Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. We're hitting 2 new episodes today. We're hitting the 3rd episode of Dune Prophecy. And then I promised that I would try Skeleton Crew. And I'm withholding my opinion until we get to the end of the show because I just want to make you wait a little bit longer.
Okay. Yeah. I know. We have not talked at all about this. Not
First
even
of all,
texted.
how was going back to work yesterday?
It was chaotic.
You just finished your paternity leave.
Yeah. So I was off for a month, which I cannot complain about. I showed up to the clinic. So for anybody that doesn't know, my company got bought out by a different company while I was essentially out on paternity leave.
Oh, office politics.
And office politics. And so it's a brand new charting system. We had people from corporate fly in from Georgia, I think. And I show up to my clinic and we have a new scheduling app. All these new companies have so many apps. It's crazy. Anyway, so I don't even have that app yet. I've been literally off the face of the planet. I show up to my clinic and I'm logging in, getting set up, and then another provider walks in.
You're in the wrong place, bro.
Well, they said that to me. And I had to leave. I was in the wrong place. So I had to run all the way down to one of our sister locations. So I was late and had to get logged on and set up. So that started my day. And then it was a super busy day. I hate to say it, but one of my patients waited 102 minutes.
Oh, shit.
To see me. And that was with me just balls to the wall.
How many patients did you see that day total?
It wasn't that many. It wasn't that many.
Stacked
but
up at one point in time.
Everyone came all at once.
Gotcha.
20 people showed up all at once. It felt like. So it was wild, but it's good to be back. My job's cool. But sitting at home with your family is hard to beat.
Dude, I'm telling you. It's even with Carly, she works so much. She works a lot more than I do in terms of hours. And when I have her for vacation for a while, and she's my best friend.
Yeah,
and we get to hang out.
Exactly.
And then she has to go back to work. I'm always like, okay, time to enter into this different phase of life now.
Dude, we've talked about this a lot. My brain legitimately changes when I'm less stressed. I feel
we call it other Luke.
Yeah, we call it other Luke. I literally feel like a different person. So I felt myself dipping back into that a day before I went back to work.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Man.
So no, but I'm trying to stay on top of it. My headspace is way better. I think old Luke would have been really, really stressed about a new company and a new charting system and, dealing with all that, let alone the craziness of an urgent care. Right. But I think it went well. Overall, I feel pretty good.
And there will be an adjustment as you get into the new systems, but at the end of the day, you'll find your groove and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And like you said, overall, even when you are working, just compared to what it was like when you were in family practice, it's literally a completely different person. If you guys Luke used to show up to places when he would be done with work, and the big thing was just the charting. It was there were two main differences. It was the insane amount of charting, and then it was the stress of real medical investigative decision making.
The patient load was insane.
Yeah, and that's we always talk about in urgent care. It's if someone comes in and they have something that is pretty serious,
catastrophic, active heart attack.
Yeah.
I get to call 911 on that.
Whereas if one of your patients came in family practice and was presenting with those things, it is now your responsibility.
Right. Well, and even more so, let's say something's feeling like a big diagnosis like cancer. Well, I cannot miss that diagnosis in family practice.
You're the first filter.
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, but I'm also filtering for potentially years. So if I'm missing that diagnosis over and over and over again, if someone's if they're hey, I'm feeling really tired, or I'm having night sweats, or unusual weight loss that I'm not trying to have. And if that's going on for months and months and months, and if I don't investigate that properly, I am missing the ball on that, which urgent care, it's a different vibe. Primary care is more like snake in the grass. You don't want to walk on it, but it's there. Whereas urgent care or anything even remotely emergency type medicine is you're in the room with the tiger and it's there and you've got to figure it out. Right. Yeah. So it's just a different vibe, but overall it feels good. It's good to be back.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this. It was you had a different, there was a different type of accomplishment that you felt at times in primary care. I remember
it's definitely more prestigious.
When you would find something cool, or when you get patients that repeat patients that would show you all this love for how well you took care of them over years. It was definitely, but Luke would come over and like we'd be trying to have a beer, and I could literally see it in his face. Like
I'd
I could
be
just see it in your face,
like
man.
10% of myself.
Yeah. You were either one, completely exhausted to the point of like where you're barely present, or two, I could tell you were like obsessing about a decision you made earlier in the day and freaking out over whether or not you did the right thing. And by the way, like you always did the right thing.
I did a good job.
Like Luke is fucking good at his job. He's very good at it. It's just it affected you. And dude, I'll never forget the day that you made that change. We talked about it for a long time.
Oh, it felt good.
It was a very hard decision, and it's been cool. And like and I think especially now that you have a family and that sort of thing. It
was the right choice.
Yes, family of 4 moving into this next phase.
I know, dude.
It's fun, man.
It's crazy.
I'm excited. We're coming over for dinner tomorrow night. I'm excited to hang out.
It's gonna be awesome
and have some time, some fun.
It'll be good.
Let's get to the show though. So
Dune, yeah,
this was an interesting. This is a thing we've seen pretty often from some of the shows. Famously, episode 3 of the Acolyte show that we watched, where it's like, all right, now it's time to go back in time,
right?
And let's start to flush out some story. And the main dynamic that I think they're continuing to flush out here through the story of Tula and her basically assassinating an entire portion of the
she's
Atreides
a murderer.
Family. Yeah. It sounds to me like she killed the entire Atreides family except for one single boy.
True. The guy that had the bad leg.
Yeah.
The kid that had a bad leg.
And I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if that ends up being something that our Valia gets upset about at some point in time. You mean you didn't kill the entire family?
Even the little kid, the nice one?
But I think the delineation that they're trying to set up here, and I think this is going to be something that comes to fruition. I mean, we already are seeing it with Tula attaching that the girl who ran into issues with the agony.
Hooking
What's
her
name? Hooking her up in the
Lila.
By hooking her up in that like kind of back room, where they have all the genetic stuff. But like they're starting to paint the picture of a small rift, which is built between Tula and Valia, and like it kind of Valia's character actually reminds me a little bit of Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, where like you could tell like she kind of has at her core a really benevolent cause, which is like both like it sounds to me like the Atreides did screw over the Harkonnens,
right? And
Valia's pretty pissed off about it.
Like the entire universe hates the Harkonnens because of them. It sounds like
exactly.
That's big.
They've become the joke of the galaxy, right? And so beyond that though, the stuff with the leadership, like, and this is something that her and Valia and the Reverend Mother that took her in, Raquel, I think is her name.
Yeah, Raquel.
They both are obsessed with this concept of like, hey, like this system is so flawed because these houses keep putting asshole leaders in control. Why don't we like take a little bit more proactive approach in terms of putting the right leaders?
Proactive meaning playing God.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like I'm not talking about
a little proactive
process.
No, I know.
I'm focused
I know
on,
what you mean.
Exactly.
I know what you mean.
But yeah, like they're crossing these lines, right? So like you go back to Daenerys Targaryen with Game of Thrones, and it's like, okay, her family gets overthrown, which, by the way, I mean, the Mad King was burning people alive and doing all sorts of janky shit. So, like, he basically brought the rebellion on.
Sure.
But, like, a lot of really shady shit happened. Like, you heard about, like, you watched season 1 of Game of Thrones. Like the Mountain, like, takes, one of the relatives of the king and, like rapes her and kills her children. And, like,
so awful.
Like really, obviously, all of Daenerys' family gets murdered except for her and her brother. Like all this terrible stuff happens, things. Right? And then she goes over to Essos, and when she's over there, she's like running into all the stuff with the slave trade and all this kind of stuff. And Daenerys' like goal in life is like, I am going to break the wheel. These houses are corrupt. I am going to overturn the system and give the power back to the people. That's kind of like her idea, right? But then as you start to see these things executed in practice, it's like, okay, well, her game plan is to take dragons and basically what amounts to horse pirates, which is what I'm blanking on what they're called. It's killing me that I can't remember this. Khal Drogo of the I'm blanking on what they're called.
You'll think of it.
Yeah, it's the army of the horsemen. But like they They literally just rape and pillage. That's what they do. Like they go
in the name of some valiant cause.
Yeah, they rape and pillage. No, well, they weren't even doing a valiant. That was their economy.
I
in
see,
Essos, and then she brought them as an army over to Westeros, and then obviously she's got the Unsullied army, which is like a bunch of slaves that have been castrated. So like in practice,
where do they come up with this in Game of Thrones?
But there's in practice, you're like, okay, so you get over there, and what are you going to do? Just kill all the great houses, and then have like these pirate horsemen run the entire continent, and like what happens?
That's a little half baked.
And then also like the slave army. I just said what they were called, and I blanked on it again. But the
Jay's had a long day. He's done a lot of episodes.
Such a long day. I've like
this is pod number 15 for Jason over the last 2 days.
But her other army like can't reproduce. So like in practice, it's like it doesn't actually make a lot of sense, and there's a lot of moral gray areas. And she did over the course of the Game of Thrones seasons, like Daenerys does more and more sketchy stuff, and then at the end, obviously she goes crazy, which you don't know anything about because you haven't seen the show. But like it reminds me of the Valia thing, where it's like she's so headstrong in this concept of what she wants to achieve, but she's so like willing to do literally anything to make it happen, that I think she's starting to alienate Tula a little bit. And I think even when Tula comes back after killing the Atreides,
I was going to bring that up.
Talks to Valia, like you could tell Valia's like, good job, blah blah blah. And
right.
And Tula's like, that made me really uncomfortable.
Was that a good job? Yeah. Well, yeah, she just murdered how many people? Even the family though, even like Tula's mom, it seems like she just hates Valia, right? Like, and even the mom, almost like it insinuates that it was Valia still that told Tula, like that ran the show, like it seems
Tula
like
shot down. She's like, no, I'm making my own decisions.
Is she though?
Yeah, I think so. I think,
okay.
Look, here's the thing. I think Tula is loyal to Valia, but only to a point. And I think that is the point. Like, I think Valia goes like, here's why I think we should do this, and here's what I need you to do. And I think Tula looks at it, and I think she goes, okay, I'm in this time.
Right.
But like, I think it's like a perpetual, like, you've got to convince me of where you're at with this stuff. And I do think that this is leading towards at least some sort of temporary schism between the two of them that probably ends in them coming back around. But
Tula honestly did hate doing that too, because she did it in a relatively humane way too. Like, obviously murdering 30 people is not humane to start. But if you're going to do it, it seems like that poison that she killed them with was relatively painless and kind of unassuming from what I understand.
During whatever the hell like ritual the Atreides were doing.
I know. It was just like a bunch of man stuff,
Yeah, let's get muddy.
They're muddy, like around a fire in
torches.
The woods, torches, nighttime. Maybe get drunk. I can't tell.
Yeah, I think there was some drinking going on.
Yeah, and it did seem like she had some feelings for the last guy that she ended up killing, where she like stabbed him in the neck. The guy that she hooked up with.
Boy.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed, and he was like, he seemed like a stand-up dude, like he was actually, I think, gonna overlook her family name, the Harkonnens, right? And he was gonna try and work with it.
He definitely liked her.
Oh yeah, definitely. And
real.
It seemed like she liked him. Yeah, she felt regretful that she had to do the deed.
Yeah, it was an interesting kind of storyline there. They did dive a little bit further into as well, like some of the schism that was forming within the sisterhood before Raquella died.
There's definitely some politics there.
Yeah, and like they did a better job of kind of like breaking down like you could see Raquella's daughter like just. What do they call it when you're street preaching? I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a
other than street preaching.
Other than street preaching,
yeah.
It's always funny. Yeah, we need to have the fancy word when like this works perfectly fine. But yeah, so she's doing a lot of like street preaching in the temple to try to like kind of like build this gap between the two of them, and like, but you can also tell that Valia's kind of got her little posse of girls that are kind of like coming over to her side.
It's still so catty too, though. Like when she walked by that little posse of girls, they kind of like looked her up and down. It was very Mean Girls, but meets Dune.
It was very Mean Girls, absolutely. And there's definitely a schism too in terms of like it looks like the older women were siding with Raquella's daughter.
Who would you side with? Would you side with the group that's trying to play God, or would you side with the others?
I mean,
that's a tough decision.
It's tough because like I also think like overly pious people can be super annoying, and I think like one of the biggest, like you and I both grew up in religion. Like there's nothing worse than the person that like like is so pious that they like can't see the forest for the
it's
trees.
A sin.
Yeah.
like I'm so holy, I'm fasting.
Dude,
it's like you do that silently.
Oh, dude, some of the worst human beings I've met in my life were like people go to church every Sunday. Like, yeah, like
for sure.
Yeah, like they can, like maybe they don't, drink or cuss or like
they've got
cheat
other
on
issues,
their wives or stuff, but they treat people terribly and they're judgmental and awful and all those things. Yeah,
no, they've got other issues. This is coming from a guy that goes to church every single time he can. For sure. There's some people that I've met that talk about going to church and they're a-holes.
Oh, dude, yeah. And then I played basketball at Christian University, and that was like a whole
that's a whole
thing.
nother thing.
Yeah, that was because like now add like the brashness and audacity of a 21-year-old who doesn't know shit but thinks he knows everything. But yeah, I would say that I don't side with either of them. Not that really like matters for the purpose of this discussion. But yeah, they're kind of like showing that little delineation taking place. The Valia too, like. They really zoomed in on this concept of her divided loyalties, like her loyalties to the sisterhood versus her loyalties towards the Harkonnen family.
Sure.
And obviously some of that still lingers because you can see it just in her little body language cues. Like when she heard about her opportunity to kill Atreides at the palace, she gets a little smirk on her face. When she gets an opportunity to say no to the Harkonnen family about getting a trucesayer, she kind of gets that little like attitude, right? But like, it is clear that earlier on, though, that was like her number one focus, and it was a big deal. And Raquel had to be like, "Hey, like, go sort your shit out with your family, and don't come back unless you're in this for real." And then obviously she goes home, and it's like over with her family.
Right, she does the agony and survives. What a bad place to go through the agony or whatever it's called. Like, the times that we've seen the agony take place, it was very controlled, like very medical vibes, right? And then she's like, "No, I'm gonna do it on this perch."
She's raw dogging the agony.
raw dogging the agony, man. She is on like what looks like a 200-foot cliff in the middle of a blizzard, alone. And she's just like, "Yeah, let me just drop this in my eye." Dude. That was ballsy, I've got to say. She really put her faith in whatever that
process was, where all the creepy old ladies in the room.
Dude, that is awful.
Together. One last thing I wanted to get into with Valia, like the dynamic with her family is an interesting one, and it kind of paints around this like concept that is also has a religious backing, which is like the idea of like vengeance being wrong or a sin or whatever.
Sure.
And a big part of that is like you look at the dynamic between Valia and her parents, which is like, okay, Valia's looking at it, she's like, this Atreides dude lied about what happened during the Machine Wars. Now the Atreides are considered the heroes of the galaxy.
Yeah.
We are considered, the pariahs of the galaxy. As a result, we're on this like snow planet.
Dealing in whale blubber.
We literally look like we're dealing in whale blubber. We literally look like we're one of those like poor like houses in Game of Thrones that's up in the north where it's like snowing and we're just having like cabin dinner. Like,
they call them backwater.
Yeah, they're
which
backwater.
Is like kind of a Star Wars term that we're aware of as well.
And like, and you could tell like it's like this atrocity that was committed by the Atreides family has clearly had a huge negative impact on the Harkonnen family.
Yeah.
But like Valia's approach is very much like, this is BS. We need to rectify this. And it starts with us getting revenge on the Atreides. Whereas her family's kind of like, it happened, it sucks, but let's move on. You know what I mean? And like, I am really curious to see where this all kind of goes from there in terms of like the pathway of the story. Because generally speaking, it's like if you try to make up for a horrible thing that somebody did by doing another horrible thing, it
turns
just
out
starts
that's a bad
this
choice.
Cycle of like, of all this terrible stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, and I do find it all, I do find that that like kind of battle between Valia and her family to be interesting because like they all know what happened with the Atreides and they're kind of just like, whatever, we'll sell our whale.
That's right.
And do what we got to do. And
mom and dad are very okay with their new lives. Well, maybe not okay, but I think they're somewhat fearful of like stirring the pot. It sounds like.
No, they definitely are.
Yeah. There was one thing that took me out. And it happened like usually the show is not so medical, man. We've talked a lot about it, but it was the medical aspect of like the stasis that Lila's in right now. And it was funny because Tula was getting updates on her condition, and it was like blood pressure 91, and then heart rate 140, And I'm like, blood pressure 91, like 91 over what?
Over what?
Number one. And then heart rate 40, and she's just sleeping there. Like, that does not make any sense. It was 140, I think. Yeah. So
140 is like I just sprinted back in transition defense.
Right. But it was like shocking. It was like, everyone knows that blood pressure has two numbers. Like, let's just say both.
Not a medical expert here. But
that just took me out of it. But that's very, nitpicky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, like, it was just a flashback. We didn't get any more real plot development outside of that. My guess is we'll kind of get back to it next week, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I told myself I was going to watch Skeleton Crew. Carly and I watched a show called The Holiday that had Jude Law in it, and Carly liked Jude Law, and she's like, I'll watch Skeleton Crew just to check it out. And I'm like super like this is going to be a kid's show. It's going to be really hard to watch. But I'm like, I'm just going to force myself to just as a Star Wars fan, it's just technically it's live action Star Wars. Like, I just want to give it a shot.
What do you mean technically? It's like
It is. It's technically live action Star Wars, but
it is live action Star Wars.
So
not technically, it just is.
And it was tough at first, just because it reminds me of any other time you watch one of those like it's like when I watch a good Pixar movie,
right?
Like where what Carly and I had Carly had me watch that Inside Out 2, the second Inside Out movie, like maybe like a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there are parts where you're like, this is meant for children and this is a little like boring or whatever it is.
Sure.
But there's just, whenever it's done really well and it has enough witty, like kind of undertone for people that are a little bit older to get enjoyment out of. And as long as there's like an interesting story and there's good special effects, it's still interesting. And like, I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad that you did.
I enjoyed it. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's the most exciting, most anticipatory Star Wars content I've ever watched. But like, by the time we got to the second episode, I'm intrigued by the storyline. This like kind of mystery planet is fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of like kind of like little Easter eggs in it. It's interesting. Sure. I'm enjoying it.
This is not my take. This is like everyone's take, and this was, I think, the entire goal of this show. But essentially, it's Goonies in the Star Wars universe. It's like a group of like younger, unsuspecting friends that are just going to get really, really close over time. They're going to go through big time struggles that otherwise they wouldn't have ever done, and they're going to get through it together and make it back home, probably. Like, that's my guess. But like, I agree. Like, I think like overall I'm intrigued. Overall I'm enjoying it. I totally agree. Like, this is low level Star Wars stuff. Like, this is not big picture by any means. Like, to the point where it seems like this planet that they're from isn't even known. Like, that's how closed off from the Star Wars universe this actually is. And of course they're going to develop that more. Like, they're talking about the barrier or something like that. Mm-hmm. We'll have to learn what that is. I think at the end of the day, what Skeleton Crew is doing is, I think it's achieving their goal, which is to create a palatable Star Wars content that doesn't break the rules of Star Wars. And I think they're doing that. Like, at the very least, they're not committing these like atrocious Star Wars sins that we've seen in other like media from Star Wars, where they're doing things that make no sense within the Star Wars universe. Like, at least everything's I think been run pretty tight in regards to like what I would consider the Star Wars universe and palatable in regards to like watching. I think
it's a low bar, but
it's a low bar.
It's a low bar for this situation because there's no stakes. Like,
well,
this is a show
there's no
stakes. Could fuck up and it wouldn't be a big deal.
True. Yeah. Like this is going to sound really morbid, but 4 little kids could die in the Star Wars universe and it wouldn't affect anything related to like the Star Wars or the Skywalker, storyline or Palpatine storyline. Like, it's pretty low level. They seem pretty secluded from the rest of the galaxy, but I'm enjoying it. Like, there is, it's not just a kid's show, in my opinion. It has kids in it, but it's not just a kid's show. Like, there was some level of violence and intensity that they showed. I think my only gripe with it is I feel like they could have made the actors and actresses, like the main characters, like 4 years older. They seem very young, and that's one thing that I think is distracting. Like, I get the premise, but when you've got like a really young kid and she's like an expert mechanic, like that's kind of distracting for me. Like, where I'm just like, there's literally no way like that she's just like this badass mechanic and she just
You gotta lean into it for the show, though.
You do, and I get that. Like that's what I mean. Like if they would have made him just like a few years older, I think it would have been a little bit more palatable. But that's like literally my only gripe with it, I think.
Yeah, that part doesn't bother me because it's more or less what I expected.
Sure.
What I enjoyed is like it does have a very Star Wars feel. It's got like just a lot of like just visual kind of like
magic.
Yeah, like
it's
visual
like,
magic. Yeah, it's a lot
yeah.
It just
it's
feels
like
like Star Wars.
It's like the magical world of Star Wars.
Here's this cool droid. Here's a starship. I was just
the
like,
droid is sick.
I was literally talking to Carly. I was like, it's always amazing to me how like just a ship jumping to hyperspace in live action gets me like every single time.
No, yeah. To bump off that, this ship had been under soil for so long, and then as it jumped into hyperspace, they had like little bits of grasses floating in space, which was like so cool. Like they're doing their homework. I think they're what's been lacking in Star Wars, which is the magic of that universe. Like I think they're capturing, which again, it's a low bar. Like of course they should get that, but in the past we've been kind of missing that.
Yeah.
And it feels like Star Wars. It's a really nice blend of like CGI, but not being too bad in regards to CGI. And also like a little bit of practical effects. Like
the
I'm really
elephant kid
it.
like is like it's wearing a practical suit, but then they're doing some post-production stuff with his eyes to like add expressions, and it's like working.
It's working for you.
It's going pretty well.
The droid is cool too. I like
the droid is super cool.
He's got a peg leg.
Star Wars has always nailed droids.
Dude, they have a droid like group, and they just like kick ass
whoever their droid
time.
team is, it's like every one of those dudes is like been doing
we
it for a while.
Specialize in droidery,
banger after banger. yeah, like they do a good job with that.
Yeah,
the plot line is fascinating to me too. There's a little bit of an Easter egg with that. They kept referring. So there was a reference to a leader of that planet. What was it called? It was like they referred to it as like the manager or like the owner or something like that. There's one single person who's in charge of that planet. At Adden, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But like, there's also a reference of something called the Great Work. Did you hear?
No,
that?
I
They
didn't.
mentioned
I didn't
it
catch
2 or
that.
3 times in the episodes.
Interesting.
And what that made me think of right away was, if you remember, in the High Republic books, there was Chancellor Lena So, and she had a series of things that she did around the galaxy that I'm pretty sure she called the Great Works, her Great Works. And one of them was, as we know, Starlight Beacon, but there were other ones that they did.
Oh, you think this is one of the works?
So a couple of things. One, there's these mint condition Old Republic credits that are floating around, which are worth a ton of money,
Right.
And then 2, the mention of the Great Work. 3, the fact that it's been a secret for so long that
this
people
planet?
think it's like not real. Like you have to think at this point in time, like this is before the First Order rose, right? So like Han Solo's still alive, Leia's still alive, all these people are still alive. There's a lot of people that are still alive that were alive during the Old Republic. So like it has to be something that is exceptionally old for it to be something that is passed into myth and legend. So my guess is that if I had to just like kind of come up with some sort of like tie to Star Wars lore, it would be that this planet is something that Chancellor Lena So put together like literally 300 years before the Phantom Menace or whatever.
This feels a little bit like a vault experiment.
I thought the exact same thing.
Like, so they're in this like picturesque community where everything is perfect, right? Everything is clean. Like this is the cleanest Star Wars has ever looked. Like they're in their little suburb, and like everyone has their little electric car that connects into the ground, and everything's clean, and they have like perfect credits, and all the kids are going to school, and there's like no there's like no crime, right, in this perfect little community, and they're completely secluded from the rest of the universe. It sounds like this really does.
There's a lot of rules.
A lot of rules.
Droids are enforcing the rules. Did you ever see The Giver?
Mm-mm.
Did you ever read The Giver when you were a kid? So, The Giver, the premise of the book was children had to basically go to this ceremony. And based on the way they performed on different assessments and in school, they would basically get called up on stage and told what they were going to do for a living.
Wow. That sounds great.
And they paint it as it's kind of a dystopia.
Uh-huh.
But in it, like, the main character kid gets told like, actually you're going to become the next giver, because he like doesn't get his job, and then the giver is the person like that holds memory for the entire community. It's this complicated story, but the callback is the choosing your job thing, and they paint it very much as a dystopia in that book, and I feel pretty strongly that they're doing the same thing with this this show. On one level, the fact that like these kids feel an enormous amount of pressure, and it's like such a big deal. Also, like the dad seems pretty unhappy.
True.
You get that vibe from him?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. He's showing up late to his house, and it sounds like his wife is dead.
His wife's dead. Yeah. And it's more complicated than that, obviously. But like it kind of reminds me of The Giver in that sense, where like it looks like it might be an experiment.
It looks experimental
by the
for
government. Sure. To like trap all these people under these conditions to like try to create a utopic society.
Right. And see if it's possible.
Yeah.
Or the other vibe too is a lot like, Fallout, where it's like, okay, if everything fails, there's going to be like one perfect society that will like regrow all of mankind. It kind of has that vibe too. They keep calling it like the barrier, right? So I'm super curious to see what the big picture is there. I think,
there was no barrier, by the way.
Of course.
It was very much a propaganda, essentially.
Right. There's propaganda somewhere. So it seems a little bit malicious. Like even like the security droids seem a little bit like they overstep a little bit, right? So I'm curious to see, like, obviously there's a bunch of storylines. There's the kid storyline, but then there's overarching like Utopia storyline.
Yeah, and I would also guess that like the pirate ship that crashed there was like searching for this planet. And there must have been some sort of like legend that grew from the planet that made people think it was treasure. Because like that's the other thing, is there's a lot of reference of it being like the treasure planet,
the treasure trove,
world. Yeah. And
which
it's like,
is very
if it's
pirate based.
Republic experiment, then there's got to be this other element that involves this big monetary benefit of some kind, which I'll be curious to see. What did you think of Jude Law's character? The very brief bit that we saw.
So yeah, is he a Jedi or not? Right, that's the big question. Something tells me he's certainly Force sensitive. Yeah, I like how he explained the Force. He's like, it says something along the lines of the space between us and the key is only an illusion.
In your mind, or only
an illusion. Yeah. I thought that was a really neat way to explain like use of the Force.
I wanted to be like, why'd you wait for the kids to get there to break out? But then I'm like, I know. Device.
It's a plot device.
I have to let that sort of stuff go all the time. Carly and I are rewatching the Kenobi show, and we finished 5 of the 6 episodes. We finished episode 5 last night.
It's really good.
It's so good. But like the whole like there's a lot of like plot devices that are there as well. Where that it's like, how do they escape? Well, like Obi-Wan manages to convince the Inquisitor chick to like lock him inside, with some stormtroopers by himself, because she secretly wants to kill Vader.
I know.
Like there's definitely some plot devices there, but like I always just have like a good amount of grace for that sort of thing. Like the Penguin had like 4 of them too, where it's like, he's really caught this time. No, he's not.
I know. Like, dude, that's how it goes. I think the biggest example of that in Kenobi is when Kenobi and Reva are talking through the metal door.
Yeah.
And they're in front of like an entire group of troopers. And it's like every single one of those dudes could probably hear what they're talking about. And she was talking, I think if I remember right, she was talking about trying to get to Vader to kill him.
Yeah.
It's like, well who's going to talk to Vader about this?
Obi-Wan basically just goes to the door and like snuffs out her entire situation.
Yeah.
She's like, how would you know that it was Anakin? Wait, hold on. You're too young.
Right.
He would have kept that hidden. Actually, you must have been a youngling. And
right.
That's
actually, all of Star Wars.
And it all like that. The story of that actually comes together pretty well. It's more just like it's a plot device that's a little bit unrealistic. But
that's what Hollywood is, right? Like we've got to be cool with that. That makes a good story. That makes it feel unusual from what we experience day to day, right? Like, that's what sets it aside.
Way more grace with that sort of thing, as long as you tell a good story, the acting is good, and the action scenes are still good.
Right.
It's kind of like, for instance, like. One of my favorite pieces of Star Wars content ever is the Stranger murdering like 8 Jedi on that planet.
You and I were so excited that night.
And like the way they get him is somehow the girl sneaks up on him and sticks a light on his back, and then a bunch of moths like carry him away. Like it's completely absurd.
Yeah, you're right.
But like because that action scene is so good, I don't care. And like my bigger issues with that show were the acting and the storytelling and that kind of thing,
Right.
And so at the end of the day, like that's all I really care about. And like right now I like, even though it's a kids show, it's got enough comic relief that I've enjoyed it. And
it's good.
I'm interested in the story, and it's Star Wars, and there's people jumping to light speed. Like there's all sorts of fun shit. So.
I am a sucker for murder mysteries, and I'm a sucker for adventure comedies, and this is an adventure comedy. So like I'm enjoying it. Like Goonies is top 100 list for me. You know, so the fact that this has a vibe of Goonies, even like them discovering the skeletons, you know, and the fact that two guys had like been battling and both mortally wounded each other. They found the bodies. Like that is so Goonies vibes.
Yeah, and even the kids are like, "This is cool."
And he's like holding a skull. The kid's holding a skull, and I think it's great. He's like, "I don't want to go home yet." He's like, catapulting
the little
through
elephant
hyperspace.
Kid is funny.
He's cute. The cute kids for sure. So I'm enjoying it overall. Yeah, it's good.
That's all we have for today, guys. As always, we sincerely appreciate you for supporting us and supporting the show. We'll be back next week for another episode of Skeleton Crew as well as Dune Prophecy. We will see you guys then.
Thanks a lot.